Right now, you are moving at the speed of light. No, that's not a metaphor. You are a clockwork mechanism hurtling through the cosmos, right now, at precisely 299,792,458 meters per second. And this fact, this simple, undeniable physical fact about your existence, is the key to unlocking a mystery that has haunted every single human being who has ever lived. It's the mystery of time. Not clock time, not the ticking of a second hand, but the flow of your own personal, felt reality, the speeding river of your childhood, the slowing stream of your adult life, and the terrifying, accelerating torrent of your later years. Why does time speed up as you age? Everyone feels it. That summer vacation when you were 8 felt like an eternity. Now a whole year flashes by in a blur. You chalk it up to psychology, to routine, to having more on your plate. But what if I told you the speeding up of time is not a trick of your mind, but a direct, measurable, physical consequence of the fundamental architecture of reality? What if your childhood actually lasted longer in a cosmic sense than your adulthood will? This isn't just a feeling, it's law of physics. It was Richard Feynman, the great explainer, who pointed us toward the unsettling truth by asking us to look at the one thing we all think we understand, a clock. Not a digital clock or a grandfather clock, but the most fundamental clock in the universe, a beam of light bouncing between two mirrors. Today we're going to take that simple thought experiment and follow it relentlessly to a conclusion that will dismantle your deepest intuition about time, memory, and your own life. We are going to prove, step by step, that the speeding up of time is an inescapable feature of a four-dimensional universe, and by the end of this journey, you will not just understand it, you will feel it in your bones. You will see the timeline of your own life stretched out before you, not as a sequence of events, but as a solid, unchanging structure where your birth and your death exist simultaneously. And when you understand that, you'll finally know why every year feels shorter than the last. This is not a video about nostalgia. This is a video about the physics of being. Now, if what I just said sounds impossible, or even a little frightening, that's exactly where you need to be. Hold on to that feeling, because if you're willing to sit with that discomfort, to follow a chain of logic even when it leads you off the edge of your intuition, you are exactly the kind of person this channel was built for. Think Beyond Physics is not about memorizing facts. It's about unlearning them. It's about peeling back the comfortable, familiar stories we tell ourselves about how the world works and confronting the raw, often counterintuitive but breathtakingly beautiful machinery underneath. It's the spirit of Richard Feynman, who believed that if you couldn't explain something to a freshman, you didn't really understand it yourself. So that's our pact. I will never use an equation you can't picture. I will never lean on jargon to sound smart. We are going to build this understanding together, from the ground up, using nothing but pure thought, simple analogies, and the courage to ask why one more time than feels comfortable. If that sounds like the kind of journey you want to be on, then consider hitting that subscribe button. It's more than just a click for us. It's a signal. It tells me you're not here for quick, flashy answers, but for the deep foundational rewiring of how you see reality. It tells me you're part of a community of the perpetually curious, the ones who choose the unsettling truth over the comfortable lie every single time. And for those of you staying, whether you're new or have been here for years, thank you. You've made a choice today to go deeper than most people ever will on this question. You've chosen to understand your own life, not just lament it. So let's bridge back into that mystery. I told you you're moving at the speed of light. That probably sounded like poetic nonsense, but it is the literal, technical truth of your existence in space-time. You see, everything in the universe always is moving at the speed of light through the four-dimensional continuum we call space-time. Your speed never changes. It can't. What changes is your direction. Right now, sitting perfectly still in your chair, almost all of your motion, your speed of light motion, is directed through the dimension of time. You are racing into the future at maximum possible speed. But if you stand up and start walking across the room, you've done something profound. You've tilted. You've diverted a tiny, almost imperceptible fraction of your total motion away from the time dimension and into the space dimensions. And that act, that simple act of moving through space, has a direct and measurable consequence. It changes the rate at which you move through time. This is not science fiction. This is the heart of Einstein's special relativity. And it's the first crack in the dam of our common sense about time. It tells us that time is not a universal metronome ticking in the background for everyone. It is a personal, private experience, a rate of change that depends on how you are moving. But this is just the very beginning. This explains why a fast-moving astronaut ages slower, but it doesn't explain why your childhood summers felt longer. For that, we need to go much, much deeper. We need to understand what time is at the most fundamental level. And to do that, we have to start by destroying the idea that we already know. So let's start with what everyone thinks they know. We all operate with a model of time in our heads. It feels like a river flowing from the past, through the narrow gate of the present moment, the now, and into the open sea of the future. The past is fixed, solid, immutable. The future is open, uncertain, full of possibility. And we, our conscious selves, are like a boat being carried along by this current, from one now to the next. This feels so obvious, so fundamental to our experience, that questioning it seems almost absurd. Time flows. Of course it does. We remember yesterday. We don't remember tomorrow. We feel anticipation. We feel regret. This model is built into our language, our planning, our very psychology. It is the stage upon which the drama of our lives plays out. And it is almost certainly fundamentally wrong. Or at least it's a useful illusion, a story our brain tells us to make sense of a reality that is far, far stranger. Why is it wrong? Let's expose the cracks slowly. First, ask yourself, what is the present moment? How thick is now? Is it this second, this millisecond? If you touch a hot stove, the pain signal takes time to travel from your hand to your brain. The visual signal of your finger pulling away takes time to hit your retina and be processed. Your experience of now is a carefully constructed edit, a synchronization of signals that arrived at different times. There is no single universal now happening in your brain, let alone in the universe, but the crack goes deeper. Think about the most basic assumption that time passes at a constant rate. We have built clocks to measure it, and they all seem to agree. A second here is a second there, but is that true? Imagine you have two identical, perfect clocks. You keep one on the ground and you put the other on a jet plane that flies around the world. When the plane lands and you compare them, the clock that flew on the plane will be ever so slightly behind the clock on the ground. It will have ticked fewer times. This isn't a mechanical error. This is a real measured effect confirmed by countless experiments with ultra-precise atomic clocks on airplanes and satellites. Time for the moving clock literally slowed down. It experienced less duration. The river flowed slower for it. This is the time dilation of special relativity I hinted at. So, time is not a constant background. Its rate depends on motion. But that's just relative motion. What about gravity? Take one of those clocks and put it at sea level. Take its twin and put it on the top of a tall mountain where gravity is ever so slightly weaker. Leave them for a year. When you compare, the clock on the mountain will be ahead of the clock at sea level. Time literally runs faster where gravity is weaker. This is the time dilation of general relativity. So now we have two monumental cracks. Time's rate changes with speed, and it changes with gravity. The universal metronome is a myth. There's no single time out there. There are only personal times. Local times, each ticking at their own rate, woven together by the geometry of space-time. But this still feels external, right? This is about clocks on mountains and jets, not about the felt experience of your life speeding up. Here's where we plant the seed for the long-term curiosity loop. If time is not a flowing river but a dimension like length, width, and height, then what is the present? In space, here is a point. But now, what is now in time? If you picture space-time as a giant block, a 4D loaf where the bread slices are moments in time, then your entire life, from birth to death, exists in that block. Your childhood is not gone. It's just over there, in a different part of the block. Your future death is not unformed. It's over there. In this block universe view, everything that ever will happen or has happened just is. There is no flow. There is just a static structure. This feels horrifying. It feels like it removes freedom, choice, the dynamism of life. It reduces us to fossils embedded in cosmic amber. And yet, this view emerges directly from the physics we just described. The physics that has been tested and confirmed to staggering precision. So we are left with a chasm. On one side, our overwhelming, visceral experience of time, flowing, of a moving present, of a life unfolding. On the other side, a cold, beautiful, and relentlessly successful mathematical model that says all of that flow is an illusion, a perspective we have from inside the block. This is the wait-what moment we must sit in. Our common sense is not just slightly off. It is built on a foundation of sand. The stage of our lives is not what we thought it was, and if the stage is different, then the play, the speeding up of our years, must have a different script. We can't answer, why does time speed up? With our old story, we have to build a new one from the new foundation. And to do that, we need to take a journey. We need to see how humanity, step by painful, brilliant step, arrived at this terrifying and magnificent picture of reality. We need to understand not just what we know, but how we came to know it, and why every wrong turn and stubborn intuition along the way was necessary. Our journey to understand time begins, as so many journeys do, with a desperate need to measure it. Long before we pondered its nature, we needed to know how much of it had passed. So we looked to the heavens, the sun's arc, the moon's phases, the slow procession of constellations. These were the first clocks, grand and impersonal, marking seasons for planting and harvest. Time was a cycle, not an arrow. The past and future were mirrors of each other, a world reborn with each spring. This was a comfortable, reassuring view. But even here, in ancient Babylon and Greece, cracks appeared. Heraclitus, gazing at a river, noted, "You could never step into the same one twice." Change was fundamental, but was time the agent of change or just its measure? This philosophical seed lay dormant for centuries while practical minds built better clocks, water clocks, hourglasses, the magnificent mechanical marvels of medieval monasteries. Time was being tamed, segmented into equal sellable units. It was becoming a resource, but it was still assumed to be absolute, universal, and separate from space. Sir Isaac Newton in 1687 formalized this common sense into cosmic law. In his monumental Principia Mathematica he declared, absolute true, and mathematical time of itself, and from its own nature, flows equably without relation to anything external. Time, for Newton, was the silent, invisible stage manager of the universe. It was the same for everyone, everywhere, whether you were standing still or moving at 1,000 miles an hour. It was the ultimate reference frame. This idea was so powerful, so intuitive, that it governed physics for over 200 years. It's the model that's still baked into our daily lives. When you say, "See you at 3 p.m., you are invoking Newton's absolute time. You assume your 3 p.m. and my 3 p.m. are the same moment in the universal flow. And for all earthly purposes, it works perfectly. But the universe, as it often does, was hiding its strangeness in plain sight. The first person to stumble upon a clue wasn't a physicist trying to revolutionize time. He was a young Danish astronomer named Ole Rømer, and in 1676 he was just trying to predict the eclipses of Jupiter's moon, Io. He noticed something infuriating. When Earth was farther from Jupiter in its orbit, the eclipses came later than calculated. When Earth was closer, they came earlier. The discrepancy was only about 22 minutes, but it was systematic. His brilliant, almost desperate leap was this: light has a finite speed. It takes time to travel from Jupiter to Earth. The changing distance meant a changing delay. He wasn't just measuring the orbits of moons. He had made the first crude measurement of the speed of light. And in that measurement lay a dormant bomb. If light has a speed, then what you see is happening now on Jupiter actually happened minutes ago. Now is not a universal condition. It's local, delayed by the travel time of information. The unity of now was shattered, but the bomb wouldn't detonate for centuries. The next clue came from an unexpected place: electricity and magnetism. In the 1860s, a Scottish physicist named James Clerk Maxwell united these two forces into a single elegant set of equations, and when he solved them, a number popped out. It was a speed, a very specific, constant speed, the speed of light. His equation said light was an electromagnetic wave, and the speed was a fundamental property of the universe, woven into the fabric of space itself. This posed a devastating question for Newton's absolute time. Imagine you're on a train moving at 60 miles per hour, and you throw a ball forward at 10 miles per hour. Someone standing on the platform sees the ball moving at 70 miles per hour. Simple velocity addition. Now imagine you're on a spaceship moving at half the speed of light, and you turn on a headlight. The light beams out. According to Newton and common sense, an observer watching you zoom by should see the light moving at 1.5 times the speed of light. But Maxwell's equation said no. The speed of light is constant. It's the same for the person on the spaceship and the person watching it. This is a logical impossibility if both time and space are absolute. One of them had to give. For decades, physicists tried to save the day. They invented the luminiferous ether, an invisible, frictionless jelly that filled all of space, a medium for light waves to ripple through. This ether would be the absolute reference frame, the embodiment of Newton's absolute space. If you could measure the speed of light relative to this ether, you could finally detect absolute motion. In 1887, 2 American scientists, Albert Michelson and Edward Morley, built an exquisitely sensitive device, an interferometer, to do just that. They reasoned that as Earth hurtled through the ether, it should create an ether wind, and the speed of light measured along the direction of Earth's travel should be different from the speed measured perpendicular to it. It was a beautiful experiment. It was a definitive experiment, and it found absolutely nothing. No difference, no ether wind. The speed of light was stubbornly, impossibly the same in every direction, no matter how Earth was moving. The scientific community was baffled. It was the most famous failed experiment in history. The stage was now set, the pieces on the board, the problem screaming for a solution. And in 1905, a 26-year-old patent clerk in Bern, Switzerland, named Albert Einstein, looked at the problem from a radically different angle. What if, he asked, we stop trying to save our intuitions? What if we take the constancy of the speed of light as a postulate, as a fundamental fact about the universe, and see what that forces us to conclude about space and time? He published a paper on the electrodynamics of moving bodies. There was no grand experiment, no new data, just pure, relentless thought. And with that paper, he shattered the Newtonian world forever. He showed that as the speed of light is constant for all observers, then time and space themselves must be flexible. They must stretch and compress to keep that speed constant. Moving clocks must tick slow. Moving rulers must contract. And now is not a universal slice. It's a relative concept. 2 events that are simultaneous for one observer are not simultaneous for another moving observer. This was special relativity. Time was dethroned from its absolute status and joined with space as a single, mutable entity, spacetime. But this was only the beginning. Einstein, now famous, wrestled with a flaw in his own theory. It described relative motion beautifully, but it couldn't handle acceleration or gravity. Newton saw gravity as a force. Einstein began to see it as something else entirely. In a thought experiment he called his happiest thought, he imagined a man in a free-falling elevator. That man would feel weightless. There would be no experiment he could do inside that box to tell if he was falling in a gravitational field or floating in deep space far from any gravity. This equivalence principle, that gravity and acceleration are locally indistinguishable, was the key. It meant gravity wasn't a force pulling on things. It was a curvature, a warping of the very space-time arena that Einstein had just created. Massive objects like the sun don't attract the Earth. They bend the space-time around them, and the Earth simply follows the straightest possible path through that curved geometry. And what was one of the direct consequences of this curvature? Time runs slower in stronger gravity. A clock at your feet, closer to Earth's center, ticks slower than a clock at your head. This was general relativity, completed in 1915. Time was not just relative. It was malleable, shaped by matter and energy. The universe was a 4-dimensional dynamic geometry. This is the historical bedrock. From celestial cycles to Newton's absolute flow, from the failed ether experiment to Einstein's relativity, humanity's understanding of time was not a straight line of progress. It was a series of collapses, of cherished ideas breaking under the weight of evidence and logic. Each collapse was unsettling. Each one required a courage to let go of a comforting view of reality. And now, we stand on the shoulders of this history. We have the tools, time that is personal, that is shaped by motion and gravity, that is part of a 4D space-time block. But we still have our original, visceral question unanswered. We have the physics of clocks, but not the psychology of the clock watcher. To bridge that gap, to understand why your personal time feels like it accelerates, we must now leave history and dive into the deep mechanism. We must examine not just time itself, but the interface between time and the only thing that can experience it, a conscious mind. So we arrive at the heart of the mystery. armed with our new conception of time. We know it's not a river. We know it's a dimension in a block universe, and our conscious awareness is like a spotlight scanning across it, creating the illusion of flow. We know its rate can be altered by physics, by speed, by gravity, but none of that directly explains the accelerating felt experience of a human life. For that, we need to build a bridge from the physics of spacetime to the psychology of perception. And to build that bridge, we need our most powerful tool, the thought experiment. Let's start with a simple one. Imagine a blank, two-dimensional sheet of paper. This is your lifetime, from birth to death. Now, take a pen and make a dot at the left edge. That's your birth. Make a dot at the right edge. That's your death. The line connecting them is your world line, your entire existence in this simplified 2D space-time. Now, I want you to imagine your conscious experience. It is not the whole line. It is a point of light, moving steadily from the left dot to the right dot. This is our intuitive model, the moving now. But here's the first twist. Is the point of light moving at a constant speed? In our daily lives, we assume it is. 1 second per second. It feels constant. But what if it isn't? What if the speed of that spotlight through your own world line could change? Let's complicate the thought experiment. Instead of a blank sheet, imagine your lifeline is a long, narrow conveyor belt passing under a fixed reading lamp. The belt is your pre-existing 4D life in the block universe. The lamp is your point of conscious awareness. As the belt moves under the lamp, different moments are illuminated. You experience them as now. But here's the crucial question. What if the conveyor belt starts slow and speeds up? The early sections of the belt, your childhood, would spend more time under the light. Each moment would be illuminated for a longer subjective duration. Later sections, as the belt accelerates, would whiz by under the light faster. Each moment would get less subjective attention. This would create the exact feeling. Long, drawn-out childhoods, fast, blurry adulthoods. But this is just an analogy. We need a mechanism. Why would the conveyor belt speed up? To find out, we need to go back to Feynman's clock. Remember the simplest clock, a photon of light bouncing between two mirrors. One tick is one round trip. Now let's anchor this clock to you, not to your body, but to your mind. What is the fundamental clock of your conscious experience? It is not a photon bouncing between mirrors. It is information processing. It is the rate at which your brain perceives, integrates, and stores new patterns. Your brain is a clock, and its ticks are memorable events. Think about this. When you are 2 years old, what does a single year represent? It is half of your entire life's experience. Your brain is a blank slate, and every day, every hour is filled with monumental firsts. First time tasting ice cream, first time seeing snow, first word, first step. The density of novel, pattern-forming, memory-encoding events is incredibly high. Your brain clock is ticking very fast because it's making lots of new ticks, new memories, new neural connections. Now let's fast forward. You are 40 years old. What does a year represent now? It is 1/40th of your life's experience. You have a routine. You drive the same route to work. You do similar tasks. You have seen countless sunsets, had countless cups of coffee. The density of truly novel, first-time experiences plummets. Your brain is not forming as many new distinct memory patterns in a given unit of clock time. So in terms of your brain's own internal metric, the metric of memorable events per year, the clock is ticking slower. But here is the profound inversion, and this is the key. If your brain's internal clock of experienced events ticks slower as you age, then external clock time will appear to pass faster. Let's make this absolutely clear with another thought experiment. Imagine you are given a special camera at birth. This camera doesn't take pictures based on seconds. It takes a picture only when it encounters something completely new and memorable. For a toddler, this camera might fire 100 times a day. Click new taste. Click new animal. Click new word. At the end of a year, the toddler has a photo album with tens of thousands of dense, unique images representing that year. Now, give that same camera to a 40-year-old with a settled life. It might fire only a few times a week. Click. A special anniversary dinner. Click. A unique problem solved at work. At the end of a year, the adult has a photo album with only a couple hundred images representing that same 365-day period. Now, at age 80, both look back. The toddler's year is represented by a massive, thick album. The adult's year is a thin pamphlet. Which year feels longer in memory? the one with more unique data points, more mental tics. The toddler's year feels vast. The adult's year feels vast. The adult's year feels brief. This is the logarithmic time scale of memory. We don't perceive time in seconds. We perceive it in the number of significant changes we register. As we age, the number of changes per objective year decreases, so each year feels subjectively shorter. But we can go deeper still because this is still a psychological model. We need to tie it to our physics. And we can. Remember your speed of light existence. Your total motion is constant. In your childhood, a much larger fraction of that motion was directed to the dimension of novel experience, the forging of new neural pathways, the intense engagement with a new world. As an adult, more of that fixed motion is directed along well-worn neural grooves, along routines that require less novel processing. You have, in a cognitive sense, developed a velocity through life. You are moving along familiar trajectories. And according to the logic of relativity, when you have a velocity through something, your experience of it changes. But there's an even more direct and more unsettling physical connection. Let's talk about entropy and the arrow of time. Why does time have a direction at all? Why do we remember the past and not the future? The fundamental reason, physicists believe, is the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy, or disorder, always increases in a closed system. We remember the past because it was a state of lower entropy. A broken egg doesn't reassemble. This increasing entropy is what gives time its arrow. Now, what is your brain? It is the most complex entropy-managing machine in the known universe. To form a memory, to have a conscious thought, requires a specific, low-entropy, highly ordered state. Your brain constantly fights entropy to maintain its structure, and here's the terrifyingly beautiful part. The rate at which you encounter new entropy, new disorder to process and make sense of, is highest when you are young. The world is new, chaotic, unstructured to your mind. Your brain works furiously to build models, to create order from that chaos. This is a high processing power state. As you age, your models are built. The world becomes more predictable. The rate of new entropy inflow, the rate of truly surprising model-breaking information decreases. Your brain's fight against entropy becomes more about maintaining existing order than creating new order. So the psychological density of events is tied to the thermodynamic density of processed entropy, and both decrease with age. This ties the feeling of time directly to a fundamental physical law. The second law of thermodynamics, acting on the complex system that is you. Your childhood lasted longer because you processed more of the universe's entropic gradient per objective second. You were, in a very real sense, drinking from a fire hose of reality. Now, you sip from a straw. But wait, I can hear an objection. This is depressing. Are you saying life becomes more boring, and that's why it speeds up? No, not boring. Efficient. Your brain has built its models. It has compressed reality. When you were a child, the sight of a tree was a dizzying explosion of details to be catalogued. Now your brain sees tree and moves on. It's not seeing less. It's using a more efficient file format. The data is compressed. This compression is what allows for expertise, for wisdom, for seeing deep patterns instead of surface details. But compression has a cost. The raw, unfiltered duration of novelty is gone. This is the trade-off. To become a master of your world, you must sacrifice the endless summer of first sight. Let's do one final, grand thought experiment to tie this all back to the block universe. Imagine your 4D world line again, from birth to death. It is not a smooth, featureless noodle. It is textured. It is dense with events and neural connections at the beginning, and it becomes progressively smoother, more regular, with fewer novel branches as it extends. Now, imagine your consciousness is not a spotlight, but a process that reads this pre-existing line. It doesn't move along it at a constant speed. Its reading speed is determined by the density of the data on the line itself. When it hits the dense, information-packed early section, it reads slowly, painstakingly decoding each complex event. This slow reading is your long childhood. When it hits the smoother, more compressed later sections, it can read much faster, gliding over familiar patterns. This fast reading is your accelerating adulthood. In this view, the speeding up is not an illusion of a flowing time, but the direct consequence of the information structure of your own fixed 4D life. The block universe doesn't change, but the complexity gradient within your block ensures that the process of experiencing it will always feel like an acceleration. This is Feynman's unsettling answer, hinted at in his discussions of entropy, information, and quantum paths. The speeding up of time is not a flaw in perception. It is a signature. It is the inevitable signature of a learning, pattern-finding, entropy-fighting consciousness, moving through the structured reality of its own existence. It is physics, written in the language of memory. All the pieces are now on the table. The absolute time of Newton is gone, replaced by the personal, malleable time of Einstein. The flowing river is gone, replaced by the static block of spacetime. The psychological feeling is gone, replaced by the physics of information processing and entropy. Now, let's make them click. Let's reveal the single unifying principle that has been hiding in plain sight this entire hour. It is not about time. It is about ratio. It is about the relationship between a unit of experience and the total collection of experience that came before it. This is the core, the engine, the inescapable mathematics of a conscious being embedded in a block universe. Remember our opening hook? You are moving at the speed of light. That fixed total speed is your total capacity for experience in a lifetime. You cannot get more. You can only allocate it. In youth, you allocate almost all of it to the forging of new neural pathways, to the creation of the file system of your mind. Every experience is a new folder, a new foundational program. This is an immense investment of your fixed cognitive resources. The ratio is huge. 1 year of experience compared to a previous total of maybe 1 or 2 years is 1001 or 12. That year is a massive fraction of your entire existence. It is dominant. It feels vast. Now, fast forward. At age 40, you've built the system. New experiences are no longer new foundational programs. They are data points entered into existing programs or occasional software updates. You're allocating your fixed cognitive resources to maintenance, optimization, and the processing of less novel data streams. Now, the ratio has collapsed. 1 year compared to a previous total of 40 years is 140. It is a tiny blip on the radar of your accumulated being. It cannot feel long because in the architecture of your memory it occupies a much smaller relative space. This is the logarithmic law of perceived time. Your brain does not store time linearly. It stores it relationally, in layers of significance. Each new unit of clock time is compared implicitly and automatically to the running total of all the clock time you have already lived. And as that denominator grows, the subjective size of the new numerator shrinks. This is why time speeds up. It is a mathematical inevitability of accumulating a past. But now, let's tie this directly to the physics of the block universe, and this is where the unsettling beauty truly unfolds. In the block universe, your life is a 4D object. It is not becoming. It is. Your birth and your death are both equally real. Both fixed points in the geometry. From the outside, it's all there. Now, imagine we could assign a density to this 4D worm that is you. Not a mass density, but an information density. The density of novel neural configurations of entropy processed, of unique world-line kinks and textures. At the beginning of the worm, the density is incredibly high. Every millimeter of its length is packed with new structure, new direction, new information. This is the high-resolution segment of your existence. As the worm extends, the density decreases. The path becomes smoother, more predictable with fewer sharp turns. It becomes lower resolution. Now, what is consciousness from this outside perspective? We can't say for certain. That's the hard problem. But we can make a physics-informed speculation. Consciousness is the process of information integration along this pre-existing world line. It is not moving along the line. It is the line being read, or rather, the line experiencing itself. In the rate of that experience, the felt duration is proportional to the information density of the segment being integrated. High-density segments take more processing power per unit of length, so they feel longer. Low-density segments are processed efficiently, so they feel shorter. This is the grand unification. The psychological ratio, 1 year versus 40 years, is the internal subjective measure. The information density of your 4D world line is the external, objective, physical correlate in the block universe. They are two descriptions of the same thing. The speeding up of time is not an illusion. It is a direct readout of the changing information theoretic structure of your own existence as a physical object in space-time. This is Feynman's answer. He saw physics as the study of the world in a way that avoids self-deception. The self-deception here is to think that time is an external force acting on us. The truth is that we are time, or rather, we are processes in time, and the feeling of its passage is the feeling of our own structure being computationally integrated. And this finally explains our opening, seemingly outrageous claim. Your childhood actually lasted longer in a cosmic sense, not in terms of clock seconds measured by an atomic clock on your wrist. Those were identical, but in terms of the fundamental currency of reality information processing, entropy gradient reduction. The formation of irreversible records. Your childhood was a period of immense cosmic activity. It was a firestorm of pattern creation. Your adulthood is, by necessity, a gentler glow of pattern maintenance. More clock seconds pass in the adult glow, but less happens in the fundamental sense that defines experience duration. So yes, in the only way that ultimately matters to the conscious entity living it, the early years are objectively, measurably longer in terms of experienced event density. This is the truth that dismantles your reality. It means you are not a passive rider on the river of time, watching the banks speed up. You are the riverbed itself, and its geological strata are laid down most thickly at the source. The flow you feel is the weathering. The reason we cling to the river metaphor, the reason this feels so counterintuitive, is that we are trying to experience the block universe from within. We are the text trying to read itself as it's written. The act of reading feels like flowing time. The changing pace of reading feels like acceleration, but the book is already complete. This is the profound, almost stoic payoff of this understanding. The speeding up is not a tragedy. It is a testament. It is the signature of a life that has learned, that has built a self, that has compressed the chaos of the universe into a working model. The blur of the years is the blur of expertise. The long, drawn-out days of youth were the necessary, slow, painful, glorious construction of the lens through which you now see the world so efficiently. You traded raw duration for depth of understanding. And a trade is written into the laws of physics, thermodynamics, and information theory. It was inevitable from the moment your first neuron fired. So where does this leave us? Standing in the quiet after the storm of an idea, we set out to answer a simple, deeply human question. Why do the years fly by? And we were led, step by inevitable step, to the outermost cliffs of physics and philosophy. We had to let go of time as a flow. We had to accept ourselves as fixed structures in an eternal block. We had to see our own consciousness as a process reading a pre-written text. This is not a comfortable truth. Comfortable truths are the ones that fit neatly on a greeting card. Cherish every moment. This truth is different. It is colder, grander, and in its own way far more beautiful. It asks you to exchange the anxiety of the river, the fear that you're not swimming fast enough, that the current is sweeping you toward a waterfall, for the perspective of the canyon. The river is an illusion. You are the canyon. Every experience, every memory, the long childhood and the swift old age, they are not passing you by. They are you. They are the carved, intricate, unchangeable shape of your existence in the universe. This is the ultimate lesson in why intuition fails us. Our intuition evolved to navigate a middle world, a world of medium-sized objects moving at medium speeds. It is brilliantly adapted for spotting predators, throwing spears, and reading social cues. It is utterly unequipped for relativity, quantum mechanics, or the block universe. Our gut feeling that time flows is a useful fiction for a social, planning, mortal creature. But it is a fiction, and the real power of physics is its willingness, its ruthless dedication to abandon useful fictions for difficult truths. That is the Feynman spirit. It is not about being smart, it is about being honest. Honest enough to follow the evidence, no matter how bizarre the destination. And this destination changes everything about how you might choose to live. If the speeding up is an inevitable signature of learning, then the only way to slow your subjective time, not to add more clock seconds, but to increase the density of your world line, is to seek novelty. Not frivolous novelty, but deep cognitive novelty. To learn a language at 50, to travel to a place that breaks your model. To start a new discipline from scratch, to genuinely listen to a person whose worldview is alien to you. Each time you do this, you are increasing the information density of your present. You are, in a very real sense, roughening the texture of your smooth adult world line. You are creating more you per objective second. You are not adding more pages to the book of your life. The book's final page is fixed. You are making the prose on the existing pages richer, more complex, more worthy of a slow and careful read. This is the active response to the physics of time. Before we part ways, I want to hear from you. This was a deep and winding journey. What part of this changed how you see reality? Was it the death of absolute time? The image of yourself as a 4D object? The link between entropy and your childhood summers? Go down to the comments and tell me. That conversation, that sharing of a shifted perspective, is how we integrate these ideas. It's how we make the block universe feel a little more like home. And if this video shifted something for you, please share it. Share it with the person who just sighed and said, "I can't believe it's already December." Share it with the friend who feels trapped by the passage of time. Don't just give them a platitude. Give them the canyon perspective. Give them the unsettling, liberating truth. Finally, if you want to keep following this path into the strange heart of things, make sure you're subscribed. This channel is a commitment to the deep dive, to the 1-hour journey that rewires a fundamental concept. Next time, we will take another obvious truth and follow it into the abyss. We will ask, what is a particle? And the answer, glimpsed through quantum field theory, will be even more radical than today's. It will suggest that nothing is solid, that everything is a ghostly vibration in an invisible field, a temporary knot in the fabric of empty space itself. But that's for next time. For now, thank you. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your courage. This is Think Beyond Physics. Remember, the truth is always stranger and more beautiful than the story.